Does your classic Mustang gauge always seem to read low? Or maybe within a few minutes of driving, it's reading dangerously close to hot and you're afraid your engine's overheating. Let's face it, if you're driving a classic car, you've probably got a fair amount of money wrapped up in it, and there's nothing worse than having an unreliable factory gauge, not knowing how hot your engine's running, because you want to protect your investment, right? So if your gauge on your classic Ford, and even a more modern Ford, is reading a little bit funky, I'm going to show you how to test it with a $10 potentiometer from Amazon. And I'll put a link in the description and in the comments with an associate's link so you can pick one of these up and add it to your electrical diagnostics toolkit. Hey folks, Casey here. Today we're going to diagnose a classic Mustang temperature gauge that isn't reading correctly using a $10 potentiometer off of Amazon and our digital multimeter. All right, so when diagnosing the temperature sending unit and the temperature gauge itself, the first step is to start under the hood at the temperature sending unit. Let me bring you in and show you what to do first. All right, so here is our sending unit. And obviously this is a fresh install. Everything is nice and clean, so we don't have to suspect the wiring harness or anything like that. But the sending unit is right here. And if you ground out this connector right here, you just attach a jumper from this to battery ground, your gauge should peg. All right, so as you can see, we've got a little alligator clip connected to the sensor lead. The other side of that jumper wire goes to the negative battery cable. All right, so we're inside of the car, and if I switch the ignition on with the gauge sender lead grounded, the gauge should peg. And there it goes, straight up to hot. Seeing the gauge peg when the sensor lead is grounded indicates that the gauge is working. Not necessarily properly, but it's working. So the next thing we want to check is that the sending unit itself is getting ground, and here's how we do that. All right, so we want to get a digital multimeter. We want to set it to ohms. We want to take one of our test leads and connect it to the body of the temperature sender. The body of the temperature sender, not the post. All right, it's very important, the body. The other lead we're going to connect to our negative battery cable. And we should see very low resistance. In this case, I'm showing about 0.2 of an ohm. Hopefully you can see that there. A low reading like that indicates that the sending unit itself is getting a good ground through the block. These sending units have sealant on them. You have to put some sort of sealant on them to keep water from leaking out of the intake manifold. But the sealant can also cause the sending unit not to ground properly to the block. Or you could have a bad engine block ground as well. So those are things to be wary of, things to check if you have a high ohm reading going from the sending unit body to the battery ground. Okay, so the way that we're going to eliminate whether the issue is with the sending unit or the gauge itself is we're going to use this little 100 ohm potentiometer that I'm holding in my hand here. All right, so here's my little test rig. We've got a 100 ohm potentiometer, a couple of electrical connectors, got a ring terminal for the negative side of the battery, we've got a bullet terminal to hook up to the factory Ford sending unit wire. Again, I will leave an Amazon Associates link to the potentiometer in the description and the comments of the video. I earn about 3% if you choose to buy one. That helps the channel out, so I thank you in advance if you decide to do that. You're also going to need a digital multimeter. I really like this one. It came from Amazon too. I've been using it for a few years with no issues. I'll leave a link to this one as well. So Ford temperature sending units, the one that this engine takes is a standard part number TS24. If you look at the application guide for that, it's from like 1965 all the way to 1997. So Ford used the same temperature sender and the same ohm scale forever. Turn my meter off. So what you need to know is 78 ohms is cold. It should read cold on the gauge. 10 ohms should read hot all the way on the H. And 26 ohms should be right in the middle, 200 degrees Fahrenheit. So what we do is we set our potentiometer to 26 ohms. And we can test it further too. We can test the extremes if we like as well. But having it read right in the center of the gauge at 200 degrees Fahrenheit is a good rule of thumb. So we're going to set our potentiometer to 26 ohms, and then we're going to power up the gauge and make sure that the gauge goes to the center. All right, so with our meter set on ohms, you'll have to trust me that I have my black lead of my meter over on the battery where this potentiometer is grounded out. I've just got a couple of little connectors going here so that I can set up my meter leads and adjust my potentiometer. And if you guys look, and go all the way down. We can go to like 10. Doesn't have to be exact, but the closer you can get it, the better. It's like that'd be 10 ohms, so that'd be hot. That should read on the H on the gauge. Go all the way up to 100, theoretically, right? A little past 100. 78 would read cold on the gauge, but we're looking for 26. So we just adjust our potentiometer until we see 26 ohms. .2 will be close enough. Then we hook it up to our sender lead and to ground. And then we check our gauge. Just to show you guys, I've got a little bullet connector going to the temperature sending unit wire. And if I've got everything hooked up correctly, when I key on, the gauge should go right to the center. There we go. All right, and so if that's a similar result to what you get, then you can rule out the gauge as being the cause. The gauge is good. The gauge is calibrated correctly. It's reading exactly what it should when given a predictable ohm value to the sending unit wire. So in this case, my gauge was reading cold. The engine would be at full operating temp. The gauge needle would barely move off the C. That's actually the failure mode I've seen most commonly for these temperature sending units. But truth be told, out of 3 similar issues that I've had with classic Mustangs, the gauge has actually been the culprit twice. So, you know, take that as you will. The sending units usually seem to work right out of the box. Now, if this is not the answer, if your gauge is reading high or low with a given ohm value, so we're giving it 26 ohms, it's still reading cold, or we're giving it 26 ohms, it's reading hot. Things to check is the wire from the sending unit to the gauge. The instrument voltage regulator could be bad. These instruments all run off, I believe, like 5.5 volts, somewhere in that neighborhood. So sometimes when the voltage regulators get fried, they either get too much voltage or not enough voltage. That's going to involve pulling the cluster and doing some more experimenting at that point. But if you do the steps in this order, you should be able to sort out what exactly is going on with your temperature gauge. And hopefully, like me, you're lucky and it's just a sending unit, because that's a pretty easy fix. All right, folks, thank you so much for watching this week. Please don't forget to hit that like button, leave a comment if you found this video interesting, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate your help and support, and I'm trying to keep these videos short and sweet so I can get you the pertinent information as quickly as possible and not waste your time. Anyway, thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next one.